Okay, we now talked a lot about information, but what I want to do is I want to take a look at what if the information is not accurate? How do we tell that also? How do we tell if somebody is actually lying to us or not giving us the benefit of the doubt? Well, let's take a look. First off, remember this part here. Sometimes we make good choices, sometimes we make bad ones. Sometimes the bad choices are our fault, sometimes the bad choices are the fault of others. Right? If we make the bad choice, that's on us. But if some others lead us into bad choice, that's on them. And don't forget, we logically and illogically make choices. Because remember, we're talking about behavioral economics. We deal with people, and remember, people are not necessarily logical. All right, so I want you to go ahead and get that same worksheet we were working on. Now we're going to fill the part in over here, and this part here, and let's look at it. First off, this thing we can be misled in making our decisions. By ourselves is where we're going to start with. And then we're going to take a look at how others could do it. But let's look at by ourselves. Let's say you're part of a team. Remember we do a cost-benefit analysis? We take a look at what's in it for us too. Remember that part? But we may not take into account the team. So that's one way it could be our problem. Because we got a team project, whether it's in school or at work. Hey, at school, you just get a low grade. At work, you get fired. But we do this because cost-benefit analysis, sometimes we think very narrow-mindedly and we look at what's in it for us. And we only think of us. The second is we may do it unconsciously without really thinking. Now remember, I was at a speaking engagement once, and on my way to my chair to get ready to get in line to speak basically, they had this table full of fruit and they had this table full of donuts. Oh yeah, donuts. Well, I picked up my plate, walked right past the fruit. Now, I'm a type 2 diabetic, so I know I should be having fruit. My doctors told me over and over again, I should have fruit. I should stay away from donuts. But you know what? I swear to God, as I walked through here with my plate, by the time I was at the end of the table, I had one in my mouth, one in my hand, and I had a plate full. And they were good. But the point is sometimes we do things without really thinking about it. And then, of course, remember, our decisions are based on expected cost and benefits. Remember that date? Okay? We don't know if it's going to be good or not until after it actually happens. So the point is, anybody ever been on that blind date from you know where? Okay? It might not be a good thing. We're basing it on one thing, but hey, life happens. So these are the three things, generally speaking, that might be our problem. Now, for other folks. First off, remember, to ourselves, we need to be truthful. We have to go ahead and say, yeah, it's a fact. It's not our opinion of what should be or our analysis of the fact. We need to remember what is the actual fact and go with it instead of opinions. Okay? Politicians love to go ahead and mislead us. Okay? Why? Because they want to get elected. And we'll talk more about that in the government section later. But there is a tendency of politicians to give us the good stuff and not tell us the bad stuff about them. Okay? Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at 7 specific things that could cause us or cause us or other people to give us bad decisions. The first one is I want you to close your eyes. Okay? Now I'm going to say a word, or excuse me, a phrase, and I want you to go ahead, and if we were in a classroom, I'd say, tell me the first thing that comes to mind. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Now at this point, I get a whole bunch of snickers. I get some folks that say, lie, cover my wallet, see if they took my wallet, and a whole bunch of other things. In other words, basically acting very negative about that statement. That's a bias, right? Because let's think about it. We do have a bias towards our government. Now, right now, we've got, oh, politicians on one side, politicians on the other side. Oh, we're such a divided country. But if you actually ask them about the government, I mean, it's hard to do, but the only people that have a lower personality rating to the public than Congress is the news media. All right? We hate the news media more than we even hate Congress. So we have a problem with government. But government provides us roads to drive on, airports, seaports, military, police, first responders, fire department. What do you think would happen if we didn't have all of those? Can you imagine trying to get to work with no roads and no bridges in Jacksonville? And we'd be very limited on where we'd be working. And try to go on a week vacation cross country if you don't have an airplane. Right? It doesn't work. You get there and the week's already over. Okay. We normally think of, some bad things, Big Brother, IRS, all that kind of stuff. So when we look at government, we have a preconception of that statement, but not based on facts. Again, it's interpretation of. Now, granted, the government does have a lot of things that it could do better. But then why is everybody wanting to come to the United States if we're so bad? Okay, something to think about. Even the folks that went ahead and said, oh my God, if Trump wins, I'm moving out. They never moved. How come? Trump bad, he won, they stayed. There's got to be a reason people want to come to our country or want to stay in our country, no matter who is in government. I mean, I heard a lot of people saying, if Biden wins, I'm moving. Well, they're still here. Okay? Maybe it is because we are an exceptional nation, and it is better here than any place else in the world. And that's something we can discuss in class if anybody cares to, either now or later when we start talking more about government and fiscal policy and stuff like that. All right, here's the second one, loaded terminology. Now, we all decided that profits are kind of good. Why? Because they provide this for us, right? They give us all kinds of different choices and opportunities. But if I put the loaded part, obscene profits, now we don't see the profits as much as we see obscene. And that brings in emotion. And emotion's going to bring in an illogical choice. So that's something to think about. Workers are great unless they're being exploited. We're looking at value judgments and prejudice of other people. So loaded terminology is a problem. Definitions. Right? Definitions. Capital. We first thought it was about money, but we went ahead and took a look at it as capital, and we're going to look at it at money again when we get to the monetary policy chapter. Different words have different meanings. The English language is over 300,000 words long. Right? More than 300,000 words in our language. And if you remember, you look at a dictionary, every word might have 6, 7, or 8 different meanings to it, depending on how it's used. The average person's vocabulary is 30,000. So I want you to think for a minute. Have you ever been in an argument with someone only to find out later that you were both saying the same thing, but you were using different words? I know it's happened to me a lot. All right, so definitions have a problem. Now, we come out with lies. I mean, that is, that's the easiest way, just lie to me. Now, most of us can find the straight out lie, right? The nose grows, that kind of thing. All right, the straight out lie is easy to see. The harder lie is what's called the lie of omission. You leave something out. Okay? When my brother was over in Hawaii, I sent him this, great big 1,500 piece puzzle, and I kept a small handful of the pieces with me, and he was having the hardest time putting that together. That's the lie of omission. Yeah, it's all there. He said, oops, I forgot these. And, after saying some rather colorful things about me, I said, fine, it works. But this also happens at various other levels. I mean, let's face it. Do you want to tell people the bad part about you or the good part and kind of forget the bad part? Well, that's a normal thing for everybody. Politicians, newspapers, entertainers, they want to look good and leave out the bad. So lie of omission, that's the biggest problem we have, and it's very prevalent in the news. Now, we also have what's called fallacies. Fallacies are falsehoods, okay? The first one we're going to talk about is fallacy of composition. And basically is what's true for one individual is true for everybody, right? So let's take a look and see how that works. I could be retired and just enjoying life, traveling all over. Well, before COVID, I could be traveling all over. Well, got a house, got a couple of cars, got money in the bank, got 5 of the 6 kids out of the house. Number 6, he may still survive to get out of the house. But the point being is I have a relatively successful life. So, because I have that relatively successful life and I've got a mostly bald head, everybody should come to the next conference and we all have bald heads, because obviously that's what made it happen. Now, some of you are going, you're nuts. And you're right, I am. That's an example of the fallacy. Just because it's true for one person does not make it true for everybody else. And if you're going into marketing, really remember that definition there. Right? It is not true for everyone else. Now, there's also what's called causation fallacies. Whoops, back up here a second. Remember, we talked about the independent variable causes an effect on the dependent variable. So that's what we mean by causation. Something causes something else to happen. Right? Cause and effects, right, are models. So the first one is what's called the post hoc fallacy. And basically, something has to happen so this can happen. Now, the easiest example I have is Native Americans and the rain dance. Okay? If you needed a good rain for your crops, you had to have the best rain dancer do his thing. And yes, it was a him all the time. So here's the problem. He goes out there and does the rain dance, the rain doesn't come. And the tribe now thinks that this person is not looked good on by the gods and booted out. But scientifically we know now that the rain dance isn't going to cause the rain. So that would be an example of post hoc fallacy. This doesn't have to happen for something else to happen correctly. Now, my favorite one is correlation versus causation. Now, correlation. 2 events are associated in a systematic and dependent way. In other words, they kind of go the same path, right? But one doesn't cause the other. Now, this one is so good, I haven't been able to replace it since I started, and it actually happened back in the 1950s. New York Police Department used ice cream sales to help catch crooks in New York City. Now, you could almost say that's right, but ice cream sales did not catch the crooks. Now, here's what was going on. In the 1950s, we had no air conditioning, all right? So here you have New York, a huge city, buildings compressed together, no real wind. How do you go ahead and cool down your apartment in the evening? Well, the little bit of wind that's there, you want running through your apartment, so you open the windows, right? But the problem is, by not having air conditioning, what do crooks love to see at 2 o'clock in the morning? Yep, them open windows. So what did the police actually do? Well, they took the ice cream sales and found out where the hottest parts of New York City were. The more sales, they assumed the hotter it was going to be. So there'd be more open windows. That's what the crooks knew. But they weren't looking at ice cream sales, they were just looking for open windows. But what the police did is they went ahead and in the hottest areas in the city, on the third shift, they had more patrol officers in those hot spots. And it was the more patrol officers that caught more crooks. Right? But that's an example of correlation versus causation. Ice cream sales didn't cause the crooks to get caught, but it showed them where the hot spots were, and the additional police went ahead and got them. All right. Again, fact versus opinion. We've got to make sure we know those. Now, how can you tell somebody is trying to mislead or lie to you? It's called sin. Okay? No, we are not talking about anything that has to do with religion. All right? Sin. And this actually wasn't done by me. This was done by Herman Cain. I heard this on his talk show once, sin. I just added the 2 S's at the bottom to make it sin. Right? But let's go with his original version first. Sin. So you're talking to somebody. You're using facts, and they can't fight the facts. So what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to switch the subject. They're going to keep switching the subject even if you try to bring it back. Because they know they can't win on the facts. So they will continue to switch the subject. Now, if they can't get you from switching the subject, they'll ignore the facts. Well, you have your facts and I have my facts. Boom, big red mushroom cloud here. There's only one set of facts. So what they're doing is they're ignoring the facts. And then if that doesn't work, they'll name call. Now, what is the #1 word that you can be called that will go ahead and take you totally off the subject and into another area, and, by the way, be totally unable to defend yourself? Are you ready? You're a racist! Okay? Whoa! That's the last thing we want to hear somebody tell us. No matter what color we are, you're a racist. Now, first off, we all like it. Then we have to go ahead and prove we're not. But according to that person, unless you agree with them on everything they said, you're a racist. How do you prove you're not? You believe that set of facts. They don't believe the facts. So to them, you're always going to be a racist because you're not agreeing with them. You can't prove a negative anyway. You can't prove you're not something. All you can prove is you are something. Because I guarantee I could go through your lifetime and come up with some sound bites through your lifetime. You know, you have one of those little machines that hook up to your head and you see everything you said through your life. And I'm sure we could find all kinds of sound bites that would prove you're a racist. That would prove you're a neo-Nazi. That could prove that you're anything. Because first off, we can take them out of context. And second, maybe we were raised in a certain way that we haven't grown up into. Right? We rejected some of the past that we thought, and we moved on. You can't prove a negative. All right, now the 2 I added, speculation. Okay, now this is what I love from the climate changers. Because if you take a look at the facts, you'll know that climate always changes. There is nobody on Earth that believes climate does not change. Right? At one time, the Sahara Desert was like the South Pole. Okay? So climate changes. We all know that. The United States going ahead and putting all kinds of climate restrictions on the United States, even, I forget which cabinet member brought it out in their confirmation hearings. I don't know if it was Kerry or somebody else, but they basically said, if the United States does all this stuff, it's not going to change what's going on anyway. Because the United States is not the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is not the United States. As a matter of fact, a lot of things that people don't know about, because it doesn't come across, is that the United States, over the last 4 years, has continued to lower our carbon footprint, while our production has skyrocketed. In 2017 alone, we were at 1974 levels of carbon footprint. But in 1974, our economy was about the third the size of it is today. So we've tripled our economy and got our pollution underneath what we had in 74. We had acid rain, not any longer. This was in the 80s. We had rivers burning, not any longer. You can actually swim in those rivers and lakes. Okay? And we've done this without being in the Paris Climate Accords. And here's something else about the Paris Climate Accords. China is the #2 economy in the world. China produces more carbon footprint than the United States does. And China, for some reason, even though they're the #2 economy in the world, is designated a developing nation. Now, why is that important? Because they still have like 5 more years that they don't have to be anywhere near doing anything on reducing their carbon footprint. Because developing nations had like a 10-year moratorium. You got a 10-year period, pollute as much as you want. And trust me, China is. I don't know if it's actually true or not, but it's kind of in the ballpark. For every coal plant that we put into play, China put in 100. Okay? So, the only thing that cutting our carbon footprint is going to do is going to kill jobs, drop our economy, and lower our standard of living. And in microeconomics, we get into the energy area and we really look at that. We'll also take a little bit of look at it through the class, because it is a Washington, D.C. policy. And we'll be taking a look at it from both the good and the bad side. What does the climate folks say that's good about it? What's the anti-climate folks say about what's bad about it? And again, we're going to look at it from both sides. The choice is yours. But we are going to look at it. But the speculation comes in, if all of this happens and you're still doing that, well, what if we really are right? Maybe we don't have all the data yet, but we are right that man is causing the climate to change. Don't you want to go ahead and fix it for the children? Yeah, let's bring the emotion in there on that. All right, we're fixing it for the children. Speculation. What might happen? Guess, assume, estimate, wonder, suspect, infer, theorize, presume, all these kind of words. Shouldn't we take precautions just in case? Something to think about. And then, of course, the other is substitution. What if one person said it versus another person? Now, this goes back to Obama, Trump, and the concept of immigration bans. 2017, Trump went ahead and put 7 countries on the ban with ties to terrorism. Now, this has also been called the Muslim ban. There are 57 Muslim countries in the world. And none of those 7 are really popular. As a matter of fact, the most populous Muslim nation, if I recall right, it kind of surprised me, is Indonesia. Right? But the point is, they weren't on the ban. So if the #1 populous country in the world with Muslims in it is not on the ban, how can you call it a Muslim ban? Because we want to get emotion involved. Okay? Yeah, it was for 120 days. Oh, by the way, those 7 countries, that was a list from the Obama administration. In other words, they were going to go ahead and say, maybe we should do this. So that was President Obama's list. And President Trump said, fine, we'll put it into play, and we may add to it, which we never did. It was for 120 days, which meant it was only temporary. Right? And the key was we're going to put it into place until there is a real vetting system to protect Americans from terrorists. Because those 7 nations, it started out with Iran, you know, the one that's death to America all over the place. Then there's Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, South Sudan, and I think there was one other country in there. But anyway, the point is one of the countries was death to America. The other 6 didn't have a government. They're all involved in civil wars. There's no way to vet anybody. Right? They don't have a government to give us the information to tell us about these people. And remember, terrorists want to kill Americans. And we got 9/11 and a few other things to look at that. A lot of lawsuits because of this. Now, over time, none of the lawsuits panned out, but they were there. Now, let's go back 6 years. President Obama put a ban on the Iranians, state sponsor of international terrorism, for 180 days, not 120. Numerous ones followed. No vetting system was in place, that's why he put it in there. They chant death to America constantly in every city. No lawsuits nor any anti-ban media coverage for that. And then remember, this list was developed in 2016 by the Obama administration. They were going to put it in place, but you know, they were going to leave it to Hillary, but she didn't win. That's why Trump went ahead and put it in place. Otherwise, Hillary would have done it. So substitute. What if Obama, or what if Hillary was there in 2017 instead of Trump? Would we have had all of this? Who knows? Right? Now, the next question I normally get from class is, how do I find a neutral news source? Answer, you know, they all have biases. But you got to look, because you can find facts. All you have to do is look at, hey, you know the bias. You can dig facts out of there to help make your decisions. Now, I did a Google search for news sources. These are the ones that popped up, including, by the way, Music, Television, and Comedy Central. They were news sources according to Google. What wasn't there? Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Newsmax, and basically a lot of conservative things. They're definitely, I mean, like I said, we got music and comedy on the top one. Now, censorship, yeah, I know that should be a C. That was my goof, I haven't changed it yet. We know that Google and Facebook censor. And I don't know if you heard about it, but the head of Amazon, yeah, I forget the bald guy. But anyway, they're having a vote in a plant somewhere in the Midwest for whether they should unionize or not. Well, the head of Amazon said, you can't do mail-in balloting. Why? Because it would be unfair and, okay, here's the big and, it could be fraudulent. At the same time, a few weeks earlier, he owned CNN. So obviously everything on CNN was mail-in ballots are fine. So they're fine for a presidential election, but they're not fine for a union election in one of his businesses. Right? So Twitter does this. They mostly censorship. But guess what? Who they don't censor? The Communist Chinese Party. As a matter of fact, they go ahead and they work with the Chinese. Why? Well, here is a map of China on Google search. This place right here. This is the island of Taiwan. At one point, it was the Republic of China. And this was the People's Republic of China. It was an independent country. It was a member in the United Nations until China got the world to basically cancel Taiwan. And if you want to be China's friend, you cannot have diplomatic status, or in other words, acknowledge that China is an independent country. We don't even accept Taiwan as an independent country. Now the weird part is, though, is we still provide military weaponry to Taiwan, and we go ahead and every now and then run a carrier task force through that strait right there to remind China, hands off of Taiwan. But there's 1.3 billion people there, 1.3 billion customers there. Follow the money. Right? Okay. Now here is the first 3 months that Trump was in office. Now this was done by the Washington Post, which is not in any way, stretch, or form anywhere conservative. Okay? But their coverage showed that in the first 3 months, 93% of CNN and NBC, their coverage was negative. Okay? Now I'm not sure about you guys, but statistically, it's literally impossible to do 7% good things over a 3-month period. You even take a look at Fox News, they were close, but they were still more negative than positive. And heaven forbid if you're looking overseas, because overseas was negative also. Right? This was the news coverage. Okay, great. That's fact. Okay? Forget about opinions and all that kind of stuff. That's fact. The question still goes, how do you go ahead and figure out who you should watch? Well, this was another Google search. This was bias in the media chart that came out from Cheryl Atkinson, which was on, I think she was at the Times at this time. This line going down the middle, that would be, you're in the center. Then, of course, you got the right and you got the left. And you can see them all there. Right? So, now this one came out in 2018, so it's just a couple years old. Here is where you start getting an idea of what